Hey, what's up everyone? This is going to be the 85th opening that I'd like to share with you, which is the tank opening, T-A-N-K. It makes you think of the military tank, I guess, potentially due to the shape of how it plays out. I think this is something that is quite fairly common to actually see somebody play this opening if they only want to learn a fixed line against, the common white diagonal openings, be it Chimney or Sailboat. So, um, yeah, let's run through the sequences and you'll probably see why uh, it can be played regardless. So, f5, f6, the typical diagonal sequence lead up to the Sailboat or Tanida cow variation. So instead of playing the usual d3, black, you basically do a diagonal cutout, a slight reduced advantage to f3, and white jumps into f4 to regroup into the center, and over here you play the g5 and split up. So maybe it looks like a tank, I guess. Maybe the white is the body and the black could be the barrel or the gun of the tank. So essentially this plays out to this shape, which is the tank opening. So it can be fairly counterintuitive for white in terms of the follow-up, but I would say that it's also counterintuitive for black. I've seen Japanese players play this, even local players in Singapore. One of the more experienced players also play this variation. So one of the convenience is that regardless of whether your opponent plays this diagonal cutout to the Tanida or Sailboat or the Chimney to f4, you can still play that diagonal cutout to f3. And if white jumps into the best move again at e3, you can still play out the g5 move and still result in this exact same shape. So this is potentially a pro, I guess, in terms of keeping it to the same line. So typically, the playout usually follows with either g4 or g6. White would know the book opening. So let's just talk about g4, I think being more common. And this diagonal cut shouldn't be too difficult for black to reach and white to pick up one disc on the center instead of taking maybe d3 or c4 that flips two discs. So over here, it's more about a regrouping move. I think still fairly intuitive over here. Until the back end, it can be a bit more challenging for black to kind of decide whether to play h4, h5, or to just do a simple cut to g6. Because g6 basically gives white opportunities to play c4 or h5 in terms of the centralization. And of course, it's fairly counterintuitive for black over here to decide to kind of form such an odd shape and allow white to kind of feed off an unbalanced edge. So over here, I would say it's still fairly acceptable position for white to play out. Over here, it might be a bit harder for white to kind of weigh between c4 and h5. Typically, we value the center of the board quite heavily, but maybe due to the urgency in terms of just breaking the shape on the edge, h5 is valued a little bit more. So black would then jump out, create e6 disc, try to get c4, white jumps in, and then black regroups to d7 perhaps. Initially the software was reading at h6 or f7, but I think potentially regrouping to the center might be, in general more effective. So yeah, essentially that's the tank opening. So yeah, I think the main point about this opening that is interesting about it is that regardless of where your opponent plays, if your opponent is playing either of these two common white variations, you can still lead up to the general sequence of where you want to be. And of course, over here for white, white has opportunities to variate, and so do you. So hopefully you like this opening and find it useful. And yeah, maybe I would recommend this for advanced players and above for black. Playing against white diagonal because you really have to go quite deep in book in order to compete with white. Because I think this is fairly common for some players to play against it. So, yep, hopefully this opening helps your game. And thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you at the next one. Goodbye.